Well, thank you, James. And I'd like to also extend my gratitude to the organizers for the invitation to be here to address you today. So I do have a couple of disclosures. I was involved in starting up the ERAS Society, and on behalf of the society, I also initiated a company that runs some of the software and administration for us. So I'll just go back a little bit in time and tell you how all of this actually begun. But if you're interested in getting the details of it, we published in JAMA Surgery last year the full story. Actually, this is a follow-up to the forerunner, which was fast-track surgery. And in fact, the first time it was ever mentioned, fast-track surgery in the literature, was by the older Engelman, Dr. Engelman, who published this paper in 1994. And it was in cardiac patients, and they bundled treatments and found that if you had a multimodal approach to the perioperative care, you could have the patients come through the surgery and recover quicker. And in particular, they showed that if you manage the fluid balance a little bit better, that seemed to make an impact. Incidentally, his son is now doing the work for the cardiac group of enhanced recovery with us in the society. But the guy that really put the concepts together was Henrik Kellett, world-famous surgeon, and he really coined the term multimodal approach to recovery, and published his ideas in 1997 after having done a very minimal trial on a few patients and published that in the Lancet. But then he proved the case with a case series of over 100 patients where they were sent home 2 days after open sigmoidectomy, which was really revolutionary at that time. Well, I met with Ken Fearon, who was just mentioned, in 2001, and we had both been interested in the metabolic and stress responses to surgery and see if we could do something about that to improve outcomes. And we got together and felt that, well, fast track is not really a proper word of what we're trying to achieve, because it seemed like we were just trying to push people out of the hospital. What we're actually trying to do is to address recovery and enhance recovery. So we started using that term instead and ended up with this enhanced recovery after surgery, or ERAS, which is now, I think, what everybody talks about. And the mechanism that we were addressing behind all of this was to see if we could, by reducing the stress of the surgery and cover the entire journey of the patients from start to full recovery, could we then improve the outcomes? We had friends of ours that joined, and initially in what we called the ERAS study group. So Henrik Kellett was with us, and also the group from Maastricht with Kees de Jong, a well-known figure in this group, I'm sure, but also the group from Tromsø. And it grew over time, and in 2010 we started the ERAS Society with Nicolas Demartin, people from Nottingham, Guildford, and Zaragoza also joining in. But what we did in the study group was the following. We sat down and spent about 18 months reviewing all the literature that we could find that made a difference for the outcomes. And we published the first evidence-based guidance on perioperative care. And that was in 2005. And this was really a big breakthrough for the whole process, I think. And it was led by Ken. And this picture has been shown in many, many presentations around the world and quoted, because it really just sums up all the different items that we found back then to make a difference for the outcome, and where we had reasonable amount of data to say that this is what we should be doing. So a guidance to the principles of enhanced recovery. What we then did was we started to see, okay, so this is what we should be doing. Are we actually doing it? We found very quickly, no, we're not doing it, and we're not aligned. We're doing very differently. So we decided to have everybody move to what would be the ideal protocol. And we audited the process. We put together an audit system, a very simplistic one, and just looked at what are we actually doing and can we support this change. And then we came up with the next surprise. When we looked at what we were actually doing, we realized it wasn't what we thought we were doing. So it was absolutely clear that we needed to have data in detail of the elements of the protocol that we were looking for and review that all the time in order to really know what was going on. And this has been one of the leading aspects of how we've been moving with trying to improve enhanced recovery in different parts of the world. This has now grown to a lot of different specialties, and there are a lot of guidelines or consensus statements that we have published with experts from these different fields in the ERAS Society, and they're all available free on the website. So if you're interested in that, please check it out. Well, another question that we asked ourselves was, okay, so this is what we should be doing, but do they actually work? And I don't know if you realize it, but very few of guidelines that are published have actually been tested in their full bloom, but we did it. And the way that we started out was actually, we did it in my unit initially with about 1,000 consecutive patients, colorectal cancer surgery. And as you can see here, with better compliance, with the protocol that we had put together, we achieved much fewer complications. It's a very graded response. And this is all the elements or all this items that could possibly interfere with the patient leaving the hospital. So it worked in one single unit, and we then went back and did the same thing in 13 hospitals, 7 countries a few years later, and found exactly the same thing. But with a slightly bigger material, this time 2,300 patients, we also found that also the major complications that rendered reoperations or intensive care were also reduced significantly with better compliance. And incidentally, we then went back and looked at our own data from my own unit 5 years down the line to see, do we have a long-term impact? And we did find a very interesting association, again, with the patients that had better compliance, fewer complications, also had a better long-term survival. And I can tell you that this has been shown for a couple of other surgeries as well. So I think this is one of the most interesting features of what we have to get a better understanding of to improve surgery and outcomes. Well, Kees de Jong had the option to work with the Kwaliteitsinstituut, which is an organization in Holland that helps change practice. And they got together and said, okay, we'll use this expert methodology and our protocol to see if we can help others to improve their practice. And what they reported was that if they could improve the compliance, as you can see here, from 44% to 75%, they had groups of tens of hospitals, the upper right-hand corner of the slide. You could see how there was a clear reduction in length of stay as a sign of better recovery. So it seemed to be working to train people to use this as well. So with that at hand, we decided, okay, we need to do something more about this. So we put together this non-for-profit, multi-professional, multidisciplinary society in 2010 with the intention to do research and education, but also to see if we could help people actually implement these practices and introduce audit as a tool that we would be working with continuously, not just a yearly report from a quality registry, but actually something that comes into daily practice. So let me come back to this slide again. It's from the first one, 2005. I'll just use it as an example to explain the philosophy behind the training and why we put it together the way we did. You know, some of these elements are decisions taken by anesthesia. Others are by surgeons. And they are to be carried out in multiple places that the patient is passing through during the journey. And when you see the picture like this, you realize this is complex. And no wonder nobody really has full control over all the details that are happening. So in order to work on these things and to integrate the entire care process, you're going to have to look at things and do things a little bit differently. So instead of having gaps between each one of the places that the patient passes through, we have to make the journey integrated and very smooth for the patient and make everybody aware of what their contribution is going to be for the overall outcome and what their choices during the short time that they have the patient under their control, what it does not only to themselves for that period of time and how they control their own objectives, but does it matter for the next one to take over? And you have to make that as good as possible. So you put together a team that covers the entire journey, and you look at the outcomes together so that everybody's aware of the results, but also the processes behind it, and keep track of that. So the solution to this is obviously to work in a new way. And instead of having the gaps between them, make sure that all these different specialties and disciplines are working in harmony as the patient is going through their journey, all linked together. That's really the idea. And it takes teamwork, and it takes leadership of that teamwork. So this is the core of the group that we would typically train. And in fact, it's one of the best trainers right now. It's the SHUV team with Martin Hubner, whom you may recognize in the middle, his anesthesiologist and the ERAS coordinating nurse. They lead the group, and then they bring in the people that needs to be in from every station of the way and the specialties that are needed. Now, obviously, this is going to change their weekly workload. They need to meet every now and then. The nurse needs to do some data collection, etc. So you need the support of the management. But in our training sessions that I'll mention in just a moment, it's actually this team that runs the change in their own hospital. So we just train them to do it. And they implement it themselves. They do the planning, auditing, updating, and what have you locally because it happens on the floor. So in order to help people get control, we introduced the interactive audit. And just to give you a glimpse of what this is, it gives you a dashboard with the length of stay of the patients. You can see over to the left, and then you have a graph of the compliance with the protocol over time. And you can see it jumps here. That's when the training took place. But you also get a grip immediately of what are the complications or the issues that keep the patient in the hospital down the left-hand corner. And of course, you get to see what kind of operations you were doing. And then you can dig into the details. And I'm just going to show you one of them. It gives you the exact details of, for the group of patients that you're studying, what did we actually do? Are we following the protocols? And it shows you immediately where you have the problems and where you need to make changes and address them. And then there are other support systems to help you move that. So we started many years ago, as I just told you. Is it relevant still today? Well, I think it is. Because surgery is, as we all know, a huge part of medicine around the world. More than 320 million patients are operated every year. And those are just the patients staying overnight, according to the WHO. And according to that organization, every fourth patient also has a complication. So really a big mission here ahead. So it's clear that best practice is not in use. And it takes a very long time to change practice, and that this leads to a massive variation in the delivery of care. I think we as surgeons all know where to go if we need an operation, but I don't think that the people out there have the same insights. So our job and what we took on is to try to help people, as many as possible, to do evidence-based perioperative care. So let's look at the variations in outcomes. And I'll just show you some data that I'm sure many of you are already aware of. This is the mortality after non-cardiac surgery in this investigation across Europe. It's a logarithmic scale, and you can see huge variation in something which is really a very important outcome. If we move to one country, this is some data on the length of stay for colonic resections in the UK some years ago. And at that time, some hospitals needed 3 weeks for recovery, whereas the one to the right here, only 3 days. And incidentally, that's Guildford outside of London, that runs probably one of the best enhanced recovery programs in the world today. And if I'm not mistaken, they also had 5 years later some of the best oncological outcomes in the country. Again, is that a coincidence or not? I don't think so. But there's also variations with our surgery and the surgeons, how we perform. And this is just data from Michigan showing complication rates among different surgeons, open and laparoscopic surgery. And certainly the anesthesiologists are doing different things in the operating room. And here's a slide showing in the red box there the variation in how much fluid was given by choice of the anesthesiologist during a 1 hour, completely uncomplicated open surgery. So you can see it varies from 2 mils to 40 mils. Huge variation. And this is some data from Canada that I got from a colleague of mine showing every consecutive patient's length of stay. 4 colorectal surgeons treating the patients all differently when it comes to the perioperative care, but very similar for the surgery. Huge variation, a lot of complications, as you can see. And then the anesthesiologist who gave me the picture, he actually convinced all those surgeons to do exactly the same perioperative care and based on evidence-based ERAS protocol. And you can see the first 20 patients to the left, or to the right, sorry. So immediately you cut the variation in delivery, you're going to get a cut in the variation in outcomes and a much better result. This is from our own training program, just an example of a hospital that we trained some 6 years ago. And you can see on the blue line how they're gradually improving their compliance with the protocol, and on the bars how the length of stay is gradually coming down. And this is typically what we're trying to achieve, is to have the unit gradually improve their practice and get better results. So today, the ERAS Society is really a worldwide network. And just going back in time, in 2010, we started the society, and at that time, we were just a few leading academic centers that formed the society. And we had our first conference in 2012, and we were just starting to implement around the world. 18 months later, we had the second conference. It was starting to grow, and now it's really growing fast. And today, it looks like this, where we're having implementation programs running in several countries around the world. Now, why is that? Why is it getting attention? It's not just among surgeons. It's now getting attention also among managers and payers, because with fewer complications and shorter stay, this is saving substantial cost for the hospitals. So this is just an example from different parts of the world. There's lots of literature out there showing the same thing. And you can see there's substantial savings when you start to introduce this. One of the better studies in this field is done by Alberta Health Service, where the entire state is doing enhanced recovery. And they're showing that for every dollar they invest, they get 4 in return, which is really, if you go to the stock market, you would be a very happy guy, I think. So this is just, oh, sorry, this one is lost. So what is changing with ERAS? And actually, ERAS keeps changing all the time because we get new information. So I'll just go back to a couple of studies. This is Ken's work some years ago, where he could show that when you introduced enhanced recovery to these patients, you actually found that age and nutritional status, which usually really influence outcomes, no longer did. So that was in open surgery. And then a few years later, this study from a Polish group that ran laparoscopic surgery with enhanced recovery. And in this situation, all the normal variables that make a difference, comorbidities, did not make a difference anymore. The only thing that really was related to outcomes was how well they followed the protocol. So when you downplay the stress almost completely with a combination of ERAS and laparoscopic surgery, it's going to be different things that makes the outcomes. So, well, you have to go back in literature whenever you come up with a new idea and see, is this really new? Well, this is what we found. In 1899, this gynecologist published in JAMA pretty much an ideal ERAS protocol: early recovery and discharge, early feeding, early mobilization, no drains. You see, there's nothing new under the moon. So it's just amazing. But just to wrap up, ERAS is really a change of care concepts and the way that we work. We get everybody involved in a team. We get full control with interactive audits. It is a growing international network, and you'll hear about it also from your discipline today. It's saving a lot of cost, and it keeps evolving. So if you're interested in learning more about it, please come and join us at our next conference in Liverpool next spring. So with that, thank you very much.
Although we're going to have some discussion at the end, there may well be some burning questions, and I don't want Olle to disappear without there being an opportunity to ask questions. There are microphones, I think, on either side of the room. Okay. We have a question over here.
Good morning, thank you very much. My name is Carlijn Buijs from Groningen. I really I'd love to see the results of ERAS. I think that's really wonderful. What would be your opinion about, because it focuses on information pre-operatively and optimization post-operatively. How would you look at the room for improvement for better pre-operative optimization?
Oh, there's lots of things going on. I didn't have time to go through all the different elements, but what is coming very strongly is the prehabilitation program that is being advocated and tested. It really is a combination of physical training, some nutritional aspects to it, and also a mental preparation, which seems to be working very well. And if you have some time before the operation, you need about 6 weeks, is what the data shows, 4 to 6 weeks to actually have an effect. That seems to be improving the outcomes as well. I know there are a lot of studies coming up around that, and there was actually in Eindhoven not long ago, even a first conference on this, which is, so I think that's a very interesting part. Another one is anemia management, which is, I think, another very important aspect that where we can make improvements.